Hey everybody, welcome back to Rusty Wrench Restorations. I'm Steve, and today we're going to rebuild the carburetor for this 1960 John Deere 430 crawler. So as you can see, we've been making a lot more progress on the crawler. I got the battery tray and doors in, and this morning I mounted up the grill. Man, what a satisfying thing, like to see this finally on there, you know, all painted up, new emblem, the correct paint and everything. It's really coming along. So really, the only thing that I have left to do is install the wiring harness, which I received in the mail yesterday from Broman. If you've never bought anything from them, amazing company, they have great products. So I usually do my own wiring harnesses, but being as I wanted this one to look a little better than average, I decided to just go ahead and get the kit from them. Yeah, so getting the wiring harness from Broman really kind of made my life a whole lot easier. It ensures that I have all the right connections, they're all the right sizes, they're all the right colors. Everything comes labeled on both ends of the wires with a number, with a key on a sheet to let you know where each end of the wire goes, and they're the correct gauge, meaning thickness of the wire for whatever the application is. Whether it's the oil pressure sending unit, the coil to the distributor, or a battery wire to the amp meter, whatever it may be, it's the right size, the right color, and it's just well-built product. So like I said, my plan was I was going to put the wiring harness in today, get everything hooked up so that I could install the tank, and I guess I could put the hood on if I want. I usually don't put the hood on until after I have it running, just to make it ease of access for working on things if I need to. But the weather is good today, and starting tomorrow for the foreseeable future, we're going to have supposedly quite a bit of rain. So the wiring harness, I'm under shelter here. I can put that in anytime, no big deal. But the last piece of the puzzle, besides installing the wiring harness, is the carburetor. I took it off the tractor when I got it, and it's been set up on a shelf, and I haven't touched it since. So that one there really needs to come apart today. It needs to be thoroughly cleaned, and while the weather's still good, I need to prime it, and hopefully I can get it painted as well, so that hopefully tomorrow we can reassemble the carburetor, even though it's raining out, and have it done and installed in the tractor, and possibly, if not tomorrow, sometime definitely this week, fire this thing off for the first time. So I'm pretty excited about that. So here it is, the Marvel Schebler TSX 688 carburetor. So this is the carburetor that came off the crawler when I got it, and as you can see, I cut the choke cable because I was going to get a new one anyway. The choke, the throttle plate seems to be free, and I got a glove with a zip tie on there, but let's see if I can get that. Sorry for all the concussions here, this vent. Let's see if the choke is free. Yeah, the choke plate's free too, so it might not be too bad. But anyway, this is it. So we're going to go ahead and disassemble this bad boy, get it cleaned up and ready for exterior paint. The first thing that I do on these before I take anything apart is I go over the whole exterior with my wire wheel, and that gets rid of most of the old paint, rust, any debris, whatever, so we can get all those exterior pieces cleaned up, and then we'll start disassembly and cleaning. Alright, you'll have to excuse all the sweating and dripping. It is a hot day out today, but the show must go on. Alright, let's get this thing cleaned up. So here is the carburetor. You can see I've gone over the whole thing and removed pretty much most of the paint and rust and grime and nastiness. So just gets the majority of the stuff off. So I'm not going to video this whole thing. Maybe I'll just do one of the hyperlapse videos, but basically we're just going to tear this whole thing apart, get it down to its individual components, and then thanks to my buddy Alvin, I got this nice tray here. We can use this for cleaning all the parts, and we'll set everything out. A lot of the pieces and components are going to get replaced. It's really important to get a good carburetor rebuild kit, and when I go to assemble this one, I'll go over that part of it with you. But there's tons of kits out there, and some are a lot more inferior than others. Some are missing pieces, some are just really generic. So again, as with anything, you can buy it once, you can buy it twice. So spend the money, get a good carburetor rebuild kit from a known carb dealer that's going to have all the correct parts and everything you need. So let's go ahead and get this thing apart. Alright, we've got the carburetor completely disassembled. I did have a little bit of trouble with this this main nozzle. And this one here, you can see, comes out the top. It's threaded through the bottom down here. Now this specific type of carburetor, there's 3 different ones. There's a Type A, which is a fixed jet, Type B, which is adjustable, and then the Type C has another adjustable jet, which basically is this piece down here. And you can see all that gunk and varnish. It's just terrible. Well, that adjustable piece threads in down here at the bottom and makes an adjustment to this main nozzle. So with this thing being so caked up and nasty, let me lean over here a bit and see, make sure that's focusing in. But I mean, it's just terrible. There's no way that would have run. And then here's the adjustment jet, all caked up, varnished. So anyway, what I did to get that out, I basically took a scribe, and you can see it's still got a bunch of that nastiness on there. But I cleaned out as best I could, used some carb cleaner. I used the CRC brake clean, so not carb cleaner. This stuff is amazing. It cleans excellent, and it doesn't leave that like white milky residue on the metal. So I know it's not carb cleaner, but I assure you it's going to do the same thing. So CRC brake clean, and then of course the magic, the coil penetrant. So I cleaned all the gunk and varnish out of there. I took my small little benzomatic propane torch and I heated the body on the inside here of the bowl, and that allowed this body to expand a little bit, to expand away from this nozzle. And then while it was still warm, I sprayed some of the coil down inside there. And then the important thing is to get a good screwdriver that has a nice square flat bottom. This is a DeWalt one. That will basically be about the same width as that main nozzle. I mean, you can see it barely fit down. Oh, wrong piece. It barely fit down inside the cavity there, but I was able to get the threads to catch and get it unthreaded out. So anyway, now that that's apart, basically we just need to clean everything. The nozzles, the jets, the adjustment jets, all that stuff doesn't need to get cleaned. It's all going to get replaced. Get your needle jet here. The only thing that's really going to be saved, so now that I have this completely apart, I'm going to go back over the outside of the bowl with the wire wheel, and I can carefully go over the top of this to clean up any old varnish and gasket material. And I'll clean out the inside of the bowl, obviously, but just do a really thorough cleaning on all parts of this, especially where your choke shaft goes through, and then on the top piece here where your throttle butterfly is. There's usually like felt or rubber seals inside here, so we'll clean all that out and put the new ones in. If you rebuild your carburetor and you don't replace these either rubber or felt seals, whether it be in the throttle butterfly or the one for the choke, you could be sucking air in through the sides, and that's going to give you a hard time getting your carburetor adjusted. And you're going to say, I took it apart, I cleaned it really good, I put on new parts, I just don't understand. Well, you probably didn't go that extra step and put these in there. So I'm going to pry those out with a little scribe, and we'll get everything cleaned out really good. And then basically I'm going to paint just the exterior pieces of the bowl and the bowl cover, and I'll let those dry overnight. So tomorrow we'll go through and we'll reassemble this whole thing. So These parts will be nice and clean and painted, and then obviously the carburetor kit is going to replace all these parts and pieces. It's not going to come with this elbow. This is a standard fitting. You can go to the plumbing section of like Home Depot or Lowe's and you can get that. I'll probably get a new one because it looks to be pretty crudted up. Again, all these parts and pieces are going to be replaced. The throttle shaft, the choke shaft, actually, yeah, got those switched around. But anyway, I'll show you my kit. So this is the kit I got. It's from Mark's Carb Parts. If you just type that in Google, you'll find it. But it is a complete kit. You'll see I have the main bowl and bowl cover gasket here. This is the gasket that's going to go on top of the carburetor to mount it to the intake manifold. And then inside here you can see I have that Type-C adjusting needle. I've got both my throttle and choke shafts. It's got all the little grommets and seals in here. The springs, I mean, every single part and piece that you would need to rebuild this carburetor is in here. So again, like I mentioned earlier, there's some companies that make inferior carburetor part kits. Don't just go on Amazon or eBay and find the cheapest one and say, oh, that looks like everything I need, because I guarantee you it's not. You're going to be missing parts or pieces. You're going to be forced to use an old needle or something that's not going to work. I mean, look at that. It's got rust and grime and it's just terrible. Anyway, invest the money. Go to Mark's Carb Parts and get you a nice good carb rebuild kit. There's a couple other companies out there as well, but I've had good luck with his carbs. Anyway, that's about it. I'm going to clean everything and get everything set up for tomorrow's video so that we can do a full video of assembly of this. It's not hard to put together. I'm not going to do a time lapse. I'll do it in real time so you can actually see everything. We'll get it put together in the initial settings, and 9.9 times out of 10 it's going to run. You might have to make a few small adjustments, you know, so get your idle adjustment here, and then if you have the opportunity, like when we go to bring this to a plow day and we can actually get a load on it, once it gets up to temperature and gets a load on it, you can have someone walk alongside of you and make your power jet adjustments while you're driving, and that'll get you where you need to be. So anyway, that's it for this part of the video. Snap of the fingers, and we're going to start on carb assembly. Alright, here we are, day 2. It's a good day for a good day. We are going to reassemble this Marvel Schebler carburetor for my 1960 John Deere 430 crawler. So yesterday, as you saw, we disassembled everything completely. I know I did it in that fast hyperspeed. I don't think there's really much value in going through each component, taking it apart. Basically, when you go to disassemble your carburetor, just take everything apart. There are some tricky things in there. This main nozzle that goes in can be kind of a bear to get out. So usually some heat and some oil or penetrating oil will help with that. And then the other one are these little the idle jets that are inside, not the idle adjustment, but the jets that are inside can be kind of tricky to get out. And honestly, most of the times you're going to end up stripping the little flathead slots that are in there, and you're going to have to drill it out. You might get lucky with an extractor. Just be careful with the extractor, because as you turn it to dig into that little brass fitting, it's also pulling that extractor down inside the bore and expanding. So it kind of is counterproductive, I guess, at that point. So you might have to just kind of do the best you can to get a small drill bit and just gradually go up incrementally in different sizes and try to drill it out. And then once you get a thin wall in there, you can kind of get a pick or a scribe and get the rest out. Whatever works best for you. So anyway, I've got everything. Everything was cleaned and painted best we could. All new components. Save all your old components just in case, if you need a reference to it, or in case you forget something. Some of the other things that I wanted to show you are these little carb cleaners. You can get these online, or if you have a Harbor Freight, they sell them for cleaning paint guns. So anyway, these little bristles and nozzles are valuable for, you know, getting inside little areas. When you read in the books, it's going to tell you not to use anything like that. Use a cleaning solvent only. As with anything, it's just to kind of protect them in the event that you break one of these off in there or something, so kind of on you. Another thing you can find is, like, this came with a carb kit that I got a few years back. Let's just say I wanted to save these little jets, you know, I could put them in here and, you know, swish them around in some carb cleaner. So you know, I think you can go to like one of those stores where they sell like loose tea, you know, and you can use one of those too. I don't know, I've never used it, but I thought it was pretty neat. But anyway, lots of little tools out there. So like I said, the kit from Mark's Carbs, everything that you see here is from him, with the exception of the float. I already had one, so I didn't have to buy one. This piece here is the fuel inlet for the bowl cover. I'm gonna have to order a new one. I'm gonna use this one for now, but the piece that threads on here is supposed to have a screen that sticks on there. So obviously you have your fuel tank and sediment bowl or filter assembly, whatever you have in your fuel system, but then there's a little screen that sticks out of this fuel supply to the carburetor, and that's like kind of a last ditch effort to try to catch any junk or crap. So anyway, I will order one of those. You can get them from, like, I think Broman has them for like $8. So excuse me, it'll cost you more in shipping than to get the part, but anyway, I need one of those. But as you can see, everything else here from Mark's Carbs is every single piece that you need, with the exception of these hex bolts. Those are what hold my carburetor to the intake manifold. I got those at Home Depot. But it has everything you need and nothing you don't. The only thing that came in this Mark's Carb kit that we're not going to use are these two little brass plugs, and those are where the throttle shaft terminates on the other side, and the choke shaft where it would, you know, the bore goes through to terminate on the other side. I didn't punch those out. You can if you want to, you know, just get a get like a drift punch and go from one side and push it out the other. I'm one of those guys where if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I'm not going to replace those plugs. They're not leaking, so they're good there. Speaking of plugs and leaking, on the bottom bowl of your carburetor, you're going to see a little, usually a copper or brass colored little like filter. So that's just porous metal, and what that's for is in the event that you flood your carburetor, on where your air inlet comes in. If you look through here where the venturi goes, you can see the top of that little porous metal, and that's basically so that if your carburetor floods, it'll drip and drain out of your carburetor. You can also pull the air intake boot off and the fuel will come out. So anyway, the reason I bring that up is when you paint it, hopefully you can see on there, you either need to cover it up with a little piece of tape, or after you're done painting, go through and scratch off the paint so that it will in fact drip the fuel if it needs to. So anyway, other than that, I'm going to change the camera angle to kind of zoom in more on the workplace over here, and we'll just kind of go through step by step putting this carburetor together. I'm not really too keen on terminology of things. I kind of just put it back together how I took it apart, but I've got the book and I'll try to do what I can to name the things so that you know what they are as well. So alright, let's get this thing put together. Alright, we're going to start this assembly by putting the choke assembly in the carburetor bowl section. So on the bottom here, as you can see, I'll pull it back out because I wanted to put it in. There's a little felt seal, if you will, that gets put in where the choke shaft goes through the bore. So you want to insert that in and make sure it's in there. Nope, nice and square. Next step is going to be the choke bracket assembly. On the back of that assembly, you'll see like a little raised flange. That's what's going to push down inside onto that packing. So what we'll do is we'll just install this bracket kind of loose right now. That's going to allow us to put the shaft through the felt seal, and then once it's assembled, we'll tighten this down, and that flange will kind of compress that felt around this shaft. So alright, next step is going to be to install the choke shaft and ensure it goes all the way through to the other side and moves freely. No need for any kind of lubrication or anything like that. So alright, now your choke plate on the back here, you can see is a spring-loaded little door that opens and closes, so that when your choke is on and closing off this airflow, it will allow additional airflow through if needed. Alright, so on your assembly here, you want to rotate this and see if I can get this set up right. And it's going to slide. Let me pull this back out to show you how this goes together, because I know it took apart fast yesterday. There's a slit in this shaft. So basically this choke throttle plate is going to go into that shaft, and then there's two small screws with lock washers that go through to hold it in place on that shaft. Alright, so now the choke lever's in. We're going to take the choke throttle plate with the flapper, and we basically have to kind of sandwich this flapper over the valve there. It's not too hard, but it might take you a second. So we'll stick it in. There we go. We'll close the choke so that this plate is in the closed position. And if your holes don't quite line up in there, you're just going to basically slide the choke shaft over until the holes line up with the shaft and the throttle plate, or the choke plate. Next thing is going to be to take these small screws and then insert them into the shaft through the throttle plate. And they do have lock washers on there. Oops. So make sure that you do have those small lock washers in place. It's very important. If you ever take the cylinder head off an engine and you see a bunch of little dots and peens on top of your cylinder, it's a sure sign that one of these, whether it be the choke or the throttle plate, one or more of these little screws had worked its way loose and got sucked up into the intake of the engine and bounced around for a while inside the combustion chamber between the top of the piston and the head. Usually it'll do that for a little bit and then get spit out the exhaust. No harm, no foul, but anyway, I'm going to get a smaller screwdriver here so that I can really crank down on these. You definitely want to make sure these are tight. You do not want these coming loose. The other thing also is, as you're tightening them, you want that choke closed so that everything is centered and actually closing off the air intake completely. If you try to tighten these with it a little bit open, it might not be centered exactly in the bore of the carburetor. So anyway, double check, tight. Alright, so now my choke lever, the choke throttle plate, is in place, and it's set so that in the event that it needs more air, this flapper will spring open. So now that that's in there, we can tighten down the choke bracket bolt, and that little flange on the back will compress that felt seal so that no air will get pulled into the carburetor from this area. So the choke part's done. We'll flip this thing to the bottom. As a reminder, make sure you don't have any paint on that screen. That's so in the event that you flood your engine out, it can drip and drain the fuel out. Alright, two things go on the bottom here. One is just your plug. There's no gasket or anything, it just gets threaded in. And that's so that if you need to drain your carburetor, you can. Probably would have been easier if I brought a socket set out here with me, but we'll use this one. And no need to go crazy on it. This plug, I should have showed you before I put it in, it actually tapers a little bit and gets bigger as it gets to the top part of this hex. So as you tighten it, it's not going to go all the way in, as you can see, and that's to ensure that you have a nice tight fit. Alright, on the bottom down here is your power adjustment valve, right? And there is a gasket that goes on there. Alright, before we put that on, we need to make sure we install our main nozzle. Okay, and that main nozzle also has its own little red gasket. So that red gasket will slide on the end of the nozzle, and that's what's going to seat the nozzle to the body inside here. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to keep the nozzle up so that the gasket stays on there, and I'll insert the bowl over the nozzle and press it down into place, and then we'll get our screwdriver and start turning it in. Sorry for the shaky hands here. Alright, I'm going to take this back out real quick. Get a bigger screwdriver here. It's getting stuck. That's not good. Let's see what's going on here. Don't forget about your little gasket in there, which I probably have seated. Yeah, this gasket's seated, so we'll just leave that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out this bore a little bit where this nozzle goes, to ensure that it comes out before I damage these threads too much. Alright, so I took this nozzle back out and tried putting a little lubricating oil on the threads, and went a little further, but it stopped again. So, you know, there may just be some gunk left in those threads, so we're just going to run a tap through. 3/8 24. Kind of wish I realized this yesterday before we went through and really cleaned everything out, but not a big deal. Run this tap through and make sure the threads are clean. We'll blow it out. I mean, the tap's going in easy, so I'm sure that's all it was. It's probably just a little gunked up. No big deal. That's the problem about these brass fittings. They're so soft that if you're not careful, you can start messing up the fittings for them, or the you know, like the threads. Not the well, the threads too, but where your screwdriver goes in. All right. Well, that threaded in pretty easy, so I'm not too concerned there. It looks like I'm down almost to where the gasket sits. Oop. Yeah, you can see all that junk that came out. Alright, go ahead and pull this tap back out. Should go in nice and easy now. So there's a lesson learned for you. I've never had to tap that out before. I've always gone in fairly easy. Here I am, supposed to be working a nice clean surface here for you. Alright, main nozzle. Let's try this again. Thread her in, the gasket's still in there. There we go, much better. And you ain't got to go crazy tightening this thing down. You're just going to basically thread it in until you feel it bottom out, and you know that the that flange on the nozzle is pressed against the gasket, so it'll compress the gasket between the nozzle flange and the body of the carburetor. Alright, there we go. So there's our nozzle. You can see it's slightly above the flat, so we're good there. Alright, next thing is going to be the power valve. So again, don't forget your gasket that goes on there. Now this has a couple different components to it. There's the actual valve itself, and then there's another piece with some packing inside and the adjustment lever. So all we're going to do is tighten up the larger, or tighten from the larger flange. This packing nut here compresses the packing that's inside there to keep the fuel from leaking out of this adjustment handle here. So again, just put your wrench on the bigger one. So gasket's in, tighten by hand. Again, I should probably have the right size wrench out here, but we'll use our fits all here crescent wrench. Alright, so now your power lever, I'll have to look in there, but you don't ever want to crank down on that adjustment, because you'll just ruin the seat. I'll take it all the way out here so you can see what we're looking at. It's just a little needle jet at the bottom. So if you compress it in too far, you'll put a little groove in that needle, and it'll never adjust right. So we're going to turn this in until we feel a little bit of resistance. That means it's sitting on the seat, and then it's probably like a turn and a half or a turn and 3/4, something like that. So we'll just leave it right now. We'll leave it loose so it doesn't jam up in anything. So that's pretty much it for the bottom of the carb. Now we do have to put this piece on the choke lever. So basically it's gonna slide through this hole. There's a little clip. It clips in the back. Let's see if we can see that in the camera. A little pin holds that in place. And then this screw, we'll thread it in and make it a little snug just so that it doesn't accidentally fall out on us. But basically your choke cable will go through one side of this block and out the other. And when you make your adjustment, you'll tighten this screw down on the cable to pinch the cable in that block. So for right now, like I said, I'm just going to screw it all the way in and make it a little snug so we don't lose that screw. So that's pretty much it for the bottom bowl assembly, right? So we did the choke lever, the choke cable adapter, the main nozzle, the drain, and your power valve adjustment. So we can go ahead and set that aside for right now. And the next part we'll work on is the bowl cover assembly. So there's a couple more pieces and components to go to this as well. First thing that I'm going to install is the one that was the hardest to get out, and that was the, let's see if I can get the right name here for you. Let's see, number 9. Nope, that's not it. It's where your idle jet comes in, right? So you use this jet here to adjust your idle. It's the jet that's underneath that. Let me look on here real quick. Yeah, just the idle jet. So anyway, this is the one that I say is always the hardest to get out, and you'll probably have to drill it out, which I did with mine as well. Just be careful that you don't mess up the threads inside there, otherwise you'll never get this thing to go in and seat properly. So anyway, let's go ahead and thread this bad boy in. And again, you don't have to crank down on it. You just want to thread it down inside until you got a little pressure like that, and that's it. That's where she sits. Alright, next thing is our needle valve assembly and float. Let's see, these here. Actually, before I put the needle valve and assembly and float assembly in, let's do this throttle plate. So, let me grab all the components for that. Sorry I messed up the shirt. I was trying to have a nice clean area to work in here. Alright, so just like the carburetor, let me make sure this thing's still recording on me. There we go. Sometimes it gets tired of hearing me talk too. So just like the choke shaft, you have the shaft assembly, the throttle plate. There's a spring. Actually, I think this spring goes on the choke side. We'll set that over there. The two screws with the lock washers. And then instead of having where the shaft goes through on the side here, instead of having the felt seal, it's got a rubber seal and a little brass cover. So we'll go ahead and install those right now. And this little brass piece will need to get kind of hammered in there a little bit. So we'll tap it to get it started to make sure it's straight. And then I just usually use the back of something. That one's kind of narrow. Alright, that's why I brought this one out. Here's the back side of a punch here. Use that to kind of drive it down inside there. Again, you don't have to go crazy. You just want it sitting down inside. Alright, throttle shaft. There's two more components here. This is your idle adjustment screw, spring, and these get screwed in here. And this will go against your stopper so you can adjust your idle RPM. So for now, we'll go ahead and install the shaft. Make sure it goes into the other side. Let's see. Make sure I have this oriented the correct way. There we go. Alright, so on your throttle plate, I don't know if you can tell or not, but they're not right in the middle. They're offset a little bit. These two holes are a little bit closer to this side, and this plate isn't an exact circle. But anyway, the number on here, this one happens to be a number 15, is going to go towards the top, right? And you'll know when you put it in here, when you go to screw it down, if you have it in the wrong orientation, you're not going to be able to the screw holes won't line up. So let me get this in here. We'll get it screwed down. This one wants to play games with me today. There we go. And you can use your scribe to kind of twist and move things around. So anyway, we can change this throttle shaft to get it to basically the closed position again, like we did with the choke, and get our holes to line up. Hopefully you can see that. And I'll do my best to get these screws in. Sometimes these ones are a little trickier than the choke one, just because of the size of the area. Just kind of drop it in and play around. There we go. That one went in pretty easy. Anyway, I won't bore you with this again. I'll fast forward, but again, like the choke, just make sure these little bolts have the lock washers on them and they are tight when you put it back together. Don't strip it out, but just make sure they're definitely in there tight and they're not going to come loose on their own. Alright, I'll fight with these and get back to you in a minute. Alright, there we go. Nice and tight. And like I said, what would be the top of the carburetor is where you want that number to show. You see that number 15 at the top of the throttle plate. Alright, so throttle plate's installed with the new seal. I've got the idle adjustment on here. So basically you can close this all the way. So that throttle's closed. That would be like your low idle, right? And you can thread this bolt in, this screw with the spring, until it's about ready to touch that plate right there. And that's what's gonna, you'll eventually set that idle when you run the tractor, right? So once the carburetor's on and your governor linkage goes in here for your throttle, that's gonna pull out to give it some fuel to run, and then it would close down for your idle. So this is what you would use to adjust your idle speed. So for right now, we can thread it in because we know it's gonna be with this throttle all the way closed. Terrible. There we go. We know it's going to be at least touching this stop with that throttle all the way closed, right? So that gets us a little bit closer so that we're not having to monkey around with it while it's on the engine trying to get behind the carburetor. All right, let's go ahead and put our idle needle in. This is our idle adjustment needle. There's a spring that goes on there as well. Same thing with this. When it goes in, you should be able to do it most of the way by hand, and then you want to just tighten it until you feel it stop. It's not going to get threaded all the way in, right? So don't go crazy with it. I'm going to turn the screwdriver with just 2 fingers right now until I feel it stop. So I can keep the screwdriver in there. Right about there. I'm gonna go 1.5 out, so there's half, 1.5. Alright, so we'll leave that there for right now. Next thing is going to be our main jet. So this is our jet body with the gasket. That's going to go back here in the back of the top of, or the back of the bowl cover. So that gets threaded in. This one here is kind of wide where these 2 screwdriver adjustments are, and I don't have a screwdriver that's wide enough. And I don't know if you saw it in the video yesterday, but I have a scraper blade. I know, right? Tools and their uses. You can get 180-degree turn on it each way, and we'll just thread that down until it's snug. Definitely want to use a bigger blade like this, especially when you're trying to take it back apart, because didn't quite go all the way. A flat tip screwdriver, if it doesn't reach in there, obviously it's only going to get one side. Alright, let's get one more little ooga dooga on here. There we go, that's good. Alright, so that's our needle seat This is the needle valve that's going to set in there. So as the carburetor is sitting in its upright position, this needle valve is going to go up and down, and it's going to allow fuel from the bowl to go into the carburetor. Right now everything is upside down. So, alright, so this float, when it's floating in there, I know everything's kind of weird, but as it runs out of fuel, or the bowl empties of fuel, the float's going to go down, allowing this needle to come off the seat and allow fuel to flow in to fill the bowl. As the bowl fills with fuel, the float is going to float on that fuel and rise up, and it's going to close this needle against that seat in there, and it's going to stop the fuel from flowing in from the tank. So this float will maintain the fuel level in the bowl. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this, kind of a little bit of interesting carb stuff here. Excuse me. The bowl for these carburetors, the fuel is all the way around the main nozzle. So at any time when this carburetor bowl is filled, the tractor obviously can turn on like inclines and up and down hills. It always keeps fuel around the same area as that nozzle. So anyway, so let's finish getting this float on. So we've got the needle jet seat in. We gotta put this little hook on the valve, and then our float, which goes this way, we're not putting it on yet, I'm just kind of getting it set up, is going to clip on. Let's see, that goes this way, I've got it upside down. It's going to clip on this float. So the needle valve will go into this hook, and that'll sit between the prongs of the float, and then this pin will go through. So let's go ahead and put the rest of this part together so that we can finish up here. So this is our venturi. This is the gasket. The large end of the venturi is going to go towards the top, right? Top of your carburetor. So bigger airflow, closer to the air intake. I don't know, however you want to remember it, but anyway, the big end won't fit through the gasket, the small end will. So we'll go ahead and put the big end of the venturi in the top. Hope if I get this in the right direction, get our gasket over there, right? Alright, I'm being a goober here. For some reason I was trying to hook this spring around the back side, but it doesn't. It goes around the front. So there's two little legs, and then the hoop. The hoop goes around the valve. The little legs go over the front of the float. So I'd put those over first, hook the needle valve in there, and basically lets the needle valve hang. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, so we're going to, and I got it upside down. Let me flip this float around real quick. There we go. Alright, needle valve, oops. Needle valve in the hoop, hanging from under the float. Stick it inside the valve, the needle seat, and then we'll push this pin through. Alright, so that's it. That's how the float goes in there. The next thing we need to do before we close this up is make sure our float is adjusted properly. So I'm going to roll this over, and of course this venturi is going to want to hit it, but hopefully, I'm not sure if you can see this in the camera, this is the float, how it goes up and down. We want to adjust it so that it is at its proper setting when it's raised like this. I know it's probably hard to see in the camera, but this one is actually sitting higher than this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure. I got to look in the book. I want to say it's like 1/4 of an inch, but I'll look from the top of this gasket material. I'll get my little screwdriver here. So you want to measure from the top of this gasket to the bottom of the float right here, right? And there's a special tool to adjust these things, whatever, and I just bend it with my hands because that's how we do things around here. But anyway, you're going to want to tweak this at the back where the valve is, the needle valve. But you want to get that measurement. I'll check what it is, and we'll get that set. So I looked in the book. It says 1/4 inch to 9/32. So we'll go with the 1/4 inch. So I have my little ruler here with my stopper set up, so I know that's 1/4 inch. So basically, I'm just gonna put this here and measure up. And honestly, this side looks a little bit okay, maybe a little low. This side's still a little high. So, like I said, I'm gonna grab my handy dandy float adjustment pliers, which are not correct. We'll tweak it and check it again. Sorry, I'm kind of looking at this from across the table. It actually looks pretty good right there. They both look like they're about the same height. Double check my measurement. I know you're seeing something different than what I'm looking at here, but it looks pretty good. So we're gonna roll with that. Alright, so at this point we're done with the lower assembly, the bowl, and the bowl cover at the top. So now we can go ahead and put them together. We can go ahead and install the bowl over the cover plate. Now that it's on there, we'll flip it over and we can install the 4 screws that hold the bowl to the bowl cover. The only other thing I recommend at this point to do is, once you get these installed and tightened down, and I'll show you here in a minute after I get these screwed in, is to kind of flip the carburetor up and down, you know, right side up and upside down. At this point you should be able to hear that float move inside there. If you don't hear it jingling back and forth as you flip it upside down and back, then it's probably hitting on something inside, maybe the bowl wall or whatever, and might need to tweak it and make some adjustments. So, alright, well, that's gonna do it. So the only other things I ended up doing was I put the gasket on with the bolts where it mounts to the intake manifold. There was a little bracket down here for where the choke cable comes through. That'll clamp the choke cable onto the bracket. And then I did end up putting the spring on the choke. So you'll pull the choke and then it'll spring closed again. So in order to get that spring on, I did have to take the choke blade back out, pull the shaft out, put it through the spring. So a little bit of rework there. Could have mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but I didn't realize it. So anyway, that's about it. I do have to tighten up the choke bracket here. The only thing I'm waiting on now is I'm going to order a new fuel inlet here because this one doesn't have the screen on it, and the amount of money and time that goes into rebuilding the carburetor, not that it's a lot of time or money, but I just don't want to have to do it again. So it's worth it, me getting the $7 part from Broman and having it sent down. So that's pretty much it. I've got a 1.5 turns out on my idle. I'll put my power to about a 1.5 turns or 2 out, and we'll just kind of go from there. So when we run it for the first time, we'll have to make some adjustments, but all in all, I think we should be all set. So I don't know, looks pretty good. That's the way a carburetor should look when you're done being when it's done being rebuilt the right way. You know, good quality parts from a good quality carb kit. Take your time, do it right, clean everything, tap everything out if you need to, and you know, get some good paint on there. Don't just spray the whole thing. You know, it's nice going to shows and seeing all the different brass and silver parts in contrast with the green paint. You know, anybody can spray paint the whole thing black or green and call it a day. You know, I know it's not all about looks, but it just goes to show the level of effort that gets put into something, and sometimes a few more minutes to make it look nicer is worth it. You know, so take some pride in the work that you do and do it right the first time. So anyway, I got to order one of these inlet strainers, and then we're good to go to install this on the crawler. Anyway, that's it for the carb rebuild. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you learned what to do, what not to do, and all that good stuff. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing.